Good morning and welcome to another reading. Today, chapters 2 and 3. So, chapter 2, Hopes and Dreams. There had been reasons for emigrating. Of course there had. Stephen and I had changed the direction in which our lives were heading because we had not wished to live only for work. We had been together only a few months before we'd started planning our escape from the rat race. But even during that time, we had always tried to make the most of our time off. 2 or 3 times a month, we'd go to a cafe a little walk from the flat where we lived. The place we sat in, or outside, to have coffee and cake was on the corner of a busy road. Grey concrete and noise surrounded us, but the people who owned the business were a friendly, hard-working couple, and we enjoyed being away from the distractions that increasingly mounted at home as life tried to prise its way between us and our dreams. But it had most likely been life's distractions which helped us build bonds and recognise kindred spirits. As with the fondness we shared for the cafe, we found common sentiment in a narrow body of water which ran only metres from another part of that busy main road. A veil of trees and large hardy shrubs shielded the banks of the stream from the traffic, and the alchemy of imaginative planning, a little money, and people in love created the illusion of a world apart from the pollution of the run-down London borough. I was a firm believer in magic. Logic had almost convinced me that beings such as fairies did not exist. But I saw too much wonder and beauty in the most unlikely of places and people to know that there was much more to what surrounded us than the rational mind could explain. Unfortunately, though, I also knew that magic died, and I could recall images of a mystical kingdom glimpsed from a train window, a city with sparkling crystal towers and sculptured gardens, where water coursed through rocks and sprang from fountains. I had believed that kingdom to be the realm of fairy princes and princesses who played in an enchanted and enchanting nighttime world. But that was before the 2 thieves named Time and Familiarity had stolen that magic. The crystal towers became the same soulless office blocks that everyone else saw, a centre of business and commerce that, with the help of 101 everyday thoughts, banished the fae folk from their kingdom and replaced such childish fantasies. By the time I said goodbye to Canary Wharf, its sparkling towers had become something that hardly registered, and the excitement I had felt after the job interview and the promise of returning to my London were absent. There was no denying that I loved London, but it was only a matter of time before I'd realised it could not have stayed my life forever. What I had not considered, though, was the world outside the London boroughs. And on seeing Devon's lush hills and meadows, was it even possible for me to pretend that the green of my part of Portugal was equal to that of England's pleasant land? The hard edges of that mountainous region did not soothe the eye in the same way, and as the hot sun's scorched leaves turned the soil to dust and the forest into a tinderbox, everywhere could be glimpsed the signs that life had to struggle to survive there. It suddenly occurred to me that, like the plants and trees, many of Portugal's people did not have the luxury of being delicate, and that awareness brought me a certain empathy with where, for the previous 4.5 years, I had called home. Chapter 3. Portuguese Jades. It was difficult to say the precise point at which I had pinned my future to Portugal. Being a determined person, it is possible that the defining moment for me was as soon as Stephen and I had begun considering a move to a part of Europe neither of us knew much about. There's the likelihood that it was whilst driving in Portugal with Stephen that the country found a place within my heart, passing through the green, rainy, windswept landscape which began clearing away the past and opening up a future. Or perhaps the decision was made after arriving at what would be our new home. Seeing Stephen walking around recording the rooms, the views from the veranda and the sounds of Sunday morning church bells carrying them on the sunny morning November breeze. Many things took me to Portugal, but without Stephen, none of them would even have begun. The memory was disjointed, and not at all like someone recounting a tale. Despite the events lacking coherence, reliving the moments that Stephen and I first discovered olive trees acted as a post to which I could tether my restless emotions. The olive Irish were less brazen in their appearance than the orange and lemon trees. Only a few November days had remained when we arrived in Portugal to start a new life, and it was citrus trees which at once caught our eyes, their fruit hanging like Christmas baubles from stout branches amongst shiny evergreen leaves. The olive tree's height, or more accurately lack of it, also served to hide them from our sight as we marvelled at the tall eucalyptus with its medicinal fragrance and silvery leaves which caught winter sunshine. Yet the greatest exhibitionist was still to be shown, when without doubt it stole the woodland stage a couple of months later. It was the acacia, draping its feathery fine jade foliage and yellow February flowers over all around it, just in time for carnival. Having little in common with the refined fronds and blooms of the acacia were the coarse needles and giant jagged-edged cones of pine trees. The fruit of that woodland inhabitant had come to our attention very early on, forming one of the first lessons we had learnt about harvesting what was in abundance all around us in our new environment. Of course, there were periods of lush growth where grasses colonised the dormant fields and wild flowers such as poppies played amongst them in May breezes. As with spring, autumn was another season which brought the rain and life back to the landscape. At this time cooling the earth and allowing it to quench its thirst. Winter was a blend of cold frosty mornings and blue skies, days in which the sun still maintained enough power to persuade people to leave their homes without coats and thick woolies. And remembering this, I began to understand that the comparisons I'd been making between England and Portugal only appeared unfavourable to the latter because of the season I found myself in at that time. So that's the end of those two chapters, short and hopefully sweet. Tomorrow, we actually begin part 2, which is entitled The Funny Family. So make of that what you will. Okay, a te menya.